Welcome to the Africa Network for Walking and Cycling first annual forum. All of the sessions are hosted by individual organisations and partnerships, and the network is just providing the platform really for that to take place. Excited to be here for this session, which is giving a voice to vulnerable road users for inclusive transport planning in African cities. And I'll now hand over to our session hosts. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Kali. Thanks also participants for joining us. So welcome to this session focusing on giving a voice to vulnerable road users for inclusive transport planning in African cities. So in this particular session, we'll have a presentation from colleagues from a team from Uganda, also a team from Zambia, and a few colleagues from Kenya. So next, can move next slide. So just to welcome you to this particular session, and I want to appreciate your time for hearing this particular presentation. So in terms of introduction and the scope of this particular presentation or webinar session is, first, we aim at sharing methodological approaches in 3 countries, namely Zambia, Uganda, and Kenya. Shown a map there of the 3 countries. So here we are going to share some preliminary findings and some of the emerging issues, just to inform participants and also get feedback from the participants on these methodological issues we are going to share with you. So we are going to use 2 projects to share our presentation and our experience. First, the one project we are going to focus in on is on equitable mobility, which is funded by British Academy. And this is a study we are carrying out in Kenya, focusing in 2 cities, Nairobi and Mombasa. And then we also have another project on inclusive climate resilient transport in Africa, where we have a case in Uganda, Kampala, and Lusaka, Zambia. So I'll give some of the highlights of the objectives of these particular 2 projects in the next slide. So in terms of outputs, it's just to peer learning from participants to see how the uptake of these methods can be taken out, and also to see, also to share, also to learn also of the participants in terms of what are some of the methods which can be appropriate in tackling the issue of vulnerable road users in terms of their voices. Next slide. So in terms of equitable mobility, so these are the objectives of equitable mobility. First, we are keen on understanding infrastructure and mobility interactions. And this we are focusing in Nairobi and Mombasa. And then secondly, we are also keen on understanding the dimensions of health and well-being in relation to mobility. And then we are also co-designing mobility infrastructure improvements to deal with the issue of health and well-being benefits. So we are working with the users of this particular to see how are this infrastructure affecting their well-being as users. And this, as I said, the study sites is Nairobi and Mombasa, which are the 2 cities located in Kenya. Next slide. So the inclusive climate transport in Africa, this is a study being funded by IMC worldwide, and for the objectives of the questions which we are keen on answering in this particular project is, first, to look at the institutional arrangements which are needed to ensure better coordination among various stakeholders to implement climate resilient infrastructure. And here we have 2 case studies, one in Kampala, Uganda, and secondly in Lusaka, Zambia. Then the second question which we are keen on is to look at how the voice of disadvantaged groups can be incorporated with planning and decision making. So how can this be done in terms of planning professionals and decision makers? So we are keen also to look at how these concerns of the mobility challenges, especially faced by the vulnerable. And here, vulnerable, we have to look about the elderly, the children, people living with disability, how their concerns can be incorporated in planning and decision making. And then what role does urban design standards play in sustainable mobility, and how can this be transformed? So we are keen also to look at the transport engineers and transport planners in terms of how they design and what kind of factors do they take into consideration, and how can this be used in achieving sustainable mobility. And then lastly, to examine the domain of urban transport with a focus on climate mitigation and adaptation. And here we're also looking at how this can also be related to mobility, gender, and recognition of disability, gender, and other roles. So next slide, which I now want to invite my colleague Amanda Abirano to take us through their experience in Kampala with their method or a technique which we use known as digital storytelling. Amanda in the house, Howard.
Hello, Amanda.
No, Yusuf.
Or Yusuf.
Are they already here?
I think maybe there's some technical problems. Shall I jump in?
Okay, you can jump in because you have the video.
Yes. Okay. So I'm Howard Cambridge. I work for the Stockholme Environment Institute, and so I'll just present about digital storytelling on behalf of our colleagues from Kampala in Uganda. Okay, so digital storytelling is the use of digital media to document, highlight, and explain the lived experience of different road users. And this is to mobilize local voices around critical issues, including road safety and urban safety and security, social inclusion, walkability, bikeability, environmental degradation, including air quality and congestion. And there's a whole range of techniques that this incorporates, from digital storytelling itself to the use of photo voice, photo montages, participatory video, creative photography hangouts, or even just using social media, such as WhatsApp, to tell a story. Digital storytelling is a collaborative process where participants and facilitators work together to produce powerful stories. And they can combine first-person voiceover narration based on an individual story script, and it also is supplemented with music, other video clips, photographs, text, and even drawings, which are taken from a storyteller's personal archive or produced in situ in the actual location where the story is set. So the case study as part of the high volume transport program funded by the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office, and the project is called Inclusive Climate Resilient Transport in African Cities. One of the case studies takes place in Kampala, where there is a planned boda free zone. Bodas are the motorcycle taxis, which are prevalent in Kampala. And the area in the CBD is intended to be a boda exclusion zone. And so we wanted to gauge the opinion of both the road users and also the boda drivers themselves. And what we did in terms of our digital storytelling was to undertake transects along the usual routes that were taken to identify and describe locations where vulnerable individuals face personal mobility challenges and safety issues. But also where possible, to highlight the positive aspects along the route where some of the mobility issues have actually been addressed. And this would provide insights into issues that may have otherwise been unavailable using other types of techniques, questionnaires, etc. And then this will enable vulnerable groups to express opinions, but also provide solutions where those mobility challenges could be addressed. So I'm going to show a video now, which records one of the stories, digital stories, of one of the people living in the area who use that street. I just need to make sure I share my sound as well. Hopefully you'll be able to hear it. If someone could just, if Romanis can shout if you can't hear this.
Manya gange tiwa Motes Esther Bachitebi nga nkolera ku Emerald Plaza. Entambula yange nga nva ewaka kozesa booda olw'ensonga ya jaamu nga bwe mukiraba. Nze ngikozesa nnyo lwa nsonga mbalasinga omulimu gwange n'eddwaliro, mbeera n'obudde bw'okugenda mu ddwaliro, kati mba n'okukozesa booda okusobola okubalansinga n'omulimu gwange, nenninyawo booda n'etwala mu ddwaliro ne ku mulimu. Zitukolera ebintu bingi nnyo za mugaso, zituyamba nnyo. Ababooda abamu si bonna nti babi, naye mulimu abamu nga bo si bayivu oba kubanga owa booda osobola omugamba nti ndi mukyala wa lubuto mbuga nkola tonkuba kumunya oba hamusiza empisa bubi n'atakifaako neefula nga atakuwulidde n'olaba nga kiringanga kyakola intentional, noddamu n'omugamba abamu bali rude n'akuddamu bubi. Booda kyewuunyisa nti buba bwakumakya budde bwolina okulabiramu omuntu ng'ali fresh. Booda baba bakyafu abamu bawunya, babeera ne jackets bazambala almost oba mwaka tebazooza. Booda ye muntu gw'ogamba nti tomuvugira mukubo wakati ne bw'alaba ekimotoka ekinene ye awaganya ayitewo, gw'omulaga nti ekimotoka okitya, n'omugamba nti yitirako emabbali n'agamba tondagira kyakola, ko bali rude. N'asala kuvugira motoka wakati oba okusanga emotoka nga jjamu mungi n'awaganya okuyitawo, n'omugamba amavivi gange ogakulugula naye nga takifaako era yakola kiki, alina kutwalira obwereere. Naye nga singa tulina engeri gye batuyambamu nga nababooda ne babalaga ng'ekikola ku kkubo, okubayigiriza okusoma signpost, n'amanya nga bw'alina okutambula nti no nina kuyita wano, sina kuyita mu kkubo wakati, ninakola bwenti. Ne babayigiriza ne bateekawo ng'etteeka nti buli owabooda ali ku kkubo alina okwambala bw'ati, gavumenti ba tebazirina, omu akuvugira mu niigiina sapatu, n'ogamba ng'agenda mu kibuga oba bambala bubi, tebali simaati. Abooda abaana bato bavuga booda, ne weebuuza yayita mu ssomero ekyokuvuga booda.
So we produced a whole series of these stories in both Kampala and also in Zambia as part of the project, and we'll be sharing those once they're fully edited, and we'll share them via our website. So in terms of assessing the actual method, this is from the perspective of our colleagues in Kampala. So how well were people engaged and given a voice? And the method let the volunteers freely express their challenges and suggest ways of improvement of the means of transport. What form of engagement did this take? So we applied case study, qualitative data collection through one-on-one interviews and direct observation. But also we wanted to get a gauge of, how can we replicate these methods more broadly. So digital storytelling is a relatively cheap method of data collection, but can capture a lot of detail and can easily be referenced to. It's fairly easy to use and requires minimal training. However, in this particular case, the equipment was mounted on a boda motorcycle, which can compromise safety of persons and equipment. Also had to cover a long distance on the boda. And also, whilst the story might take an hour to record, it then involves editing, which can take a lot longer time, up to 24 hours, just to get that 2 minutes of impactful story. So there is some technical challenges that can be faced. And so that's it now. We can take questions at the end of all our methods presentations. So I'll pass over to Daniel now.
Daniel? So I think let me just take it, because I think Daniel might also be having challenges with joining. So maybe I'll take participants take you through the second methodology, which is participatory mapping, which was used by our team from Zambia, and our colleague from Zambia Road Safety Trust. How about the next one? Yeah, in terms of just the backdrop of this method and activities in Zambia, is that we know very well that road traffic accidents pose a burden not only the health system in Zambia, but also in most of our African countries and low and middle income countries. So in terms of awareness about this public health is necessary, especially to combat this particular challenge. Yeah. So in this particular participatory method, a survey was carried out among 109 respondents aged 12 years and above, residing within the study location. So it's a location in Lusaka. Of this 109, 60.6% were female and 39.4% were male. So a questionnaire was used to better understand how these people make their journey, and also their concerns about road safety and risk associated with the roads, and also their own experience and those ideas or solutions to improve local travel using participatory mapping approaches. That's an on-site map approach. Yeah? So in terms of just defining participatory mapping, where we have reference to CALL, the year 2018. So participatory mapping is defined by CALL as a process in which our community members contribute their own experience or relationship, information and ideas about community interest, boundaries, traditional land use, and place-based issues, usually conducted in an inclusive or participatory way. Also is a unique visual representation of what a community perceive as their place and identify common features around a specific area. So here the users or the community members are seen as experts, given their knowledge and experience with the interaction with the spaces where they live. So in terms of the study of the methodology, so this study was facilitated under two different methods, gather data. One, using roadside observations, and two, conducting pedestrian interviews. So the survey was carried out at 3 spots. Okay. Next, right. So participants in participatory mapping, participants are encouraged to use a map to connect issues ideas and knowledge to a particular location. So there's a map which they normally now use to visually map out issues in those particular locations. So the information once identified is digitized and analyzed using a GIS. So this local knowledge is used to enhance official data. Of course, we know the official data about the hotspots, but at times they are not real time in terms of what is happening, because hotspots at times even shift. So using this kind of methods, we are able to get real-time information from the participants living in a particular area. So to encourage greater participation, disadvantaged groups in decision making, because they are now able to visually identify those particular areas and even give the story behind them in terms of the issues which are associated with those particular spaces. Next time. So it also, with this, it enables us or researchers and the community to get a dialogue, which is between the local stakeholders, professionals who can be planners, modelers, and policy makers to improve decision outcomes. So they are able to participate in an informed manner, because they talk about spaces where they interact with. So they're able to participate not as passengers, but actively in terms of identifying these particular places where they are. So this just shows a map here, shows the own survey and various comments given by the participants in terms of how they feel about those places, about their safety, about ability to cross, all those experiences in those particular places, which they identify and map, and those places are using GIS. So participatory mapping can use traditional methods like interviews, questions, and focus discussions, as well as digital classroom to capture the input. So it's friendly in terms of hybrid. You can use the digital platform and the analog platform to ensure that you combine the two to get the story behind about the issues which you want to map with a crossing point or just a street where most people use. So you can use different types, either using community meetings. So in the community meetings, if you have a big map, either an A1 or an A2, okay, where people can circulate, can surround, and now identify issues in that particular map. So, and also you can also use for online campaigns and also on street. So these are just the participatory mapping in terms of what you can ask and also what you can map and identify. So these are just the issues which can be mapped using participatory mapping. Yes, next. So in terms of Lusaka case study, so the mapping exercise cover randomly selected study points in all areas that were identified, which were defined in the study parameters along a street called Tokyo Way, Ring Road, Chilimbulu, and Bama Road. So these were the study sites where the research team will get the participants in these three points. Yeah? So I think this is just a repetition of age, was 12 and above. So pursuing the age group 12 and 19 years formed the highest in terms of the response, in terms of those who participated in the participatory mapping. So the mapping access took off in August this year. So as at present, that's how I think we were informed this around 2 weeks ago. So zebra crossings have been installed as safe practice along Chilimbulu Road because of the visualization of the outcome which came out from the participatory mapping. So another installation is underway along Independence Road. So this shows that in terms of even the concerns raised by the mapping exercise, which also was shared by the officials. So this enabled them to take some action in terms of trying to come up with some traffic calming measures to reduce incidences of accidents around this area. So St. Patrick's along Chilimbulu Road, this something has been done. So this good in terms of quick intervention based on ability to mobilize using participatory mapping. Next.
I can see that Daniel's joined us now.
Okay. So
Hello, Daniel.
you can take. Thanks.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hello. I Howard.
Hi.
Hi.
Do you want to continue, Daniel?
Yes, I can continue. Yeah, I can continue from here. I'm very sorry we had a bit of problems with the internet, but I'm okay now, so I can continue.
Okay, just tell me to move on to the next slide.
Yes, we can move to the next slide. I think he's done this slide. Yeah. Yeah. So I think after we did when we are doing the case study, this was before we did anything, we had to we had to do a baseline studies and then collect the actual quantitative numbers of participants. And as you can see, the variables, this is the age group that we are looking at. So we are interested to understand the ages of the people that we are talking to, so the children and also the adults. And then the other most important thing that we were interested in is the gender parity, because this case study was most focused on the most advantaged groups, and the most advantaged groups are the females, the women. So you can see that 60% of the participants were women, 66, which is out of 109 participants. And then we also looked at the mode of transport. So the people that were walking, 48% of the people we interviewed were pedestrians, then cyclists, those using buses, they come from the bus and then they walk, and then the people that were using cars. You can go to the next slide out. So the thing about the case studies, one of the most important things is to make sure that we identify the locations where people were coming from. So you can see this polygon is part of the software that we use, GIS software. So, and the green dots were the actual points where people were moving and where they felt safe, and from the location that they were traveling from to and from. Next slide. Now, for us to use the GIS and also understand where people were coming from, so we actually had a huge map, a Google map, which we asked people to actually pinpoint. So we are using stickers to pinpoint where they felt safe and where they were traveling from. So the green points, the green stickers meant that they were safe in those areas. Then the red stickers means that they were not safe as they were traveling from those areas. Then the yellow stickers meant that they were not sure, but it's okay. Next map. Now, like I said, part of this was on-street mapping, which means we're on the street. But in terms of the children, instead of interviewing the children on the street, because we are interviewing children as younger as 12 years, so we had to get permissions from the head teachers. So we had to go into actual classrooms and at the school in a safer environment, and then interviewed the children, and also the children had to point us the areas where they were moving and where they felt safe. So this is some of the photos from that perspective from the pupils. Next slide. And again, the other photo there just shows the interviews on the street, and also on the other side shows again the interviews from some areas with the pupils. So the two pictures. Next slide. Again, these are photos just to show what we're doing, interviewing different people, even taxi drivers and motorists and so on and so forth. Next slide. again, this is some different locations, again, doing the interviews and, you know, speaking to, having a feedback from the most disadvantaged groups. Next slide. So, like I said, our target group was to ensure that we had the high level participation from the women, and this graph demonstrates that we had much more women than men, and according to our target in terms of what we wanted to find out. Next slide. You know, again, that's the graphics. This is just analysis in terms of visual graphics on the people that we encountered too, and you can see that the red shows most people pedestrians on foot, and then few people in cars. Next slide. So when we started, this was completely before. There was nothing on the map, but then this is the actual map that we actually digitized, and so this is before and after. Next slide. So based on the field investigation from this study, which took a qualitative approach to understand people's journeys and all safety experiences, we can logically deduce that people were given a voice where they had their views. 100% of the respondents confirmed that they had not been asked before about their transport or traffic safety. 90% of the participants found the street on mapping approach very easy to use, as they were able to identify their original and destination points. Only 8% proves to have difficulties, while the other 2% affirmed that it was hard for them to clearly understand the map. So, next slide. I think this is where we're in. Thanks for listening.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. Is Constant online?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. I'll leave it in your hands. Just tell me when to advance the slides.
Okay, thank you very much, Howard. And I will talk a bit about placemaking as methodology in transport planning, especially in looking at pedestrianization and public space. Now, you know, one of the things in about placemaking is it's a form of tactical urbanism, and tactical urbanism is one of the short-term where we take short-term measures to have long-term impact. So as we know, we don't always have resources, you know, to go into very detailed and in-depth studies, but that is not an excuse not to act. And in planning a city, we can always allow for trial and error, and there's nothing wrong, you know, in making mistakes. And some of these tactical methods where we attempt short-term interventions can actually lead to successful long-term impact. And that's one of the placemaking is falls within such methodology. So, you know, in placemaking, the users of public space, you know, come together to turn, you know, a space into a place, you know, making it clean, safe, useful, and also memorable for people to use. Okay, and when we, oh yeah, thank you, Howard. And we tend to do this by making low-cost interventions that can be scalable in order to operate almost like what is called the Toyota way, you know, where you're constantly trying to improve to get long-term goals. And this also allows for frequent corrections and testing. In Nairobi, we've attempted placemaking on a number of occasions. In 2017, we did try it along with the Lingu Street, 2018 Banda Street, and 2019 Luthuli Avenue, which is what we're going to talk about in this particular presentation. There have been a number of other attempts within neighborhoods, like as is written on the slide there, places like next card, places like Korogocho by groups like Hope Raisers, who've also turned some of their streets, that's a low-income neighborhood where they've turned some of the streets or roads into more inclusive places where children can play and can be involved. We've also had, places like Jivanji Gardens, which is near Mwidibingu Street, where a short-term intervention pedestrianization, street closure and pedestrianization ended up with improved pedestrianization of the street. So next. So for this particular case study, we're going to, we'll talk about placemaking week in 2018, where various groups came together in order to, as part of the Luthuli Avenue revitalization program. Now, one of the objectives of this particular intervention had a number of objectives, including first, increasing awareness about the features and importance of quality public space through the implementation of some of these interventions. Another objective was to initiate the Luthuli Avenue revitalization project and explore potential for the pedestrianization of the street. As you may, those of you who are familiar with this particular street, you realize that it was full of public transport vehicles parked all over. Vehicles were revving throughout. A lot of smoke, a lot of congestion, noise, etc. The other objective was to undertake placemaking interventions to specifically connect public spaces in Nairobi CBD, and this is interestingly still a project that's still ongoing. So in spite of, even after the pedestrianization of the street, there's still attempts now at interconnecting the upper side of Nairobi with the lower, what we call the lower CBD, and the Nairobi River project, the Nairobi River regeneration project. The other objective was to initiate a strategy of partnerships for sustainable management of placemaking interventions conducted during placemaking week, and this included getting many players, many stakeholders from the area to be involved in this particular intervention, and also to appreciate some of the possible impacts of this pedestrianization and improved public space. And finally, of course, to engage policymakers and other stakeholders in dialogues designed to improve walkability on the streets. So, when you have these interventions, you can also engage some of these policymakers and people of the city in order to make them see the impact of the proposed interventions. So quite a number of groups were involved. Of course, the city involving what was then the Nairobi City County government, there's Safer Nairobi Initiative, the Luthuli Business Community, UN Habitat and UN Environment also involved. Critical Mass Nairobi, which is a cycling group, also for part of this initiative, placemakers, Hope Raisers, among others. So what did the intervention entail? Basically, temporary street closure, a car-free section of the street. So a section of the street was temporarily closed from all vehicles. People were allowed to walk through. Any cyclists who wanted to cycle through the street were allowed through. Street furniture was brought onto the street, onto the closed section, plants, benches, and there was also a lot of use of art. So, painting of the street, painting to also send certain messages like, improve pedestrian space, speed limits, etc. And also, some other attempts were made at measuring air quality along the streets, and that's where UN Environment came in. So after a while, for about 3-4 days, the street was closed, and people were able to see the fact that First of all, there were two important messages, I would say. First of all, the business community were able to see that their business could go on, without cars parked outside their shops. And quite a number of them also talked about how there was improved air quality. And there was, many of them used to have fans in their shops. So as because of all the fumes coming from the parked public transport vehicles that would drive outside the shops, it was improved air quality, and also people who are now would walk through their shops even during that short 3-day period of time. Prior to that, we had already engaged this business community. We had engaged the city county through a series of urban dialogues, meetings, photography sessions along that street, so as to build up for this particular intervention. Of course, at the end of the day, there was that appreciation of the fact that there was a better understanding that you could actually have a transformation of the street, and that the street could actually be better without all these vehicles parked outside the shops. Next, Howard will share the video now.
Getting very positive feedbacks.
One of the benefits is health, good health. People are free walking, there is security. Also that freedom, people are walking with a lot of confidence.
It's a good concept that needs to be permanent. Not only that we are doing it today, but it has to be permanent. We need to actually do the same in all the streets within Nairobi. The local business are for that, because actually they are seeing we have less congestion and pollution because of the moving matatus and buses and other cars.
And have you spoken to any of the matatu drivers, or do you know how they're feeling?
They're feeling that we're denying them business, but they're understanding that they need to have sanity within. There are also road users. There are other road users who need to use the road, like pedestrian, the guys who are cycling. They need to use the road, so they need to bring that sanity. So what
we should replicate the same in other areas, because I believe the business people in Nairobi, they are facing the same challenges. Yeah, we should be doing it almost every month to educate people how important the space is.
Like it was so pollution from the matatus and everything. I just usually feel bad for the little children, because especially when it comes to like a mother's getting a baby.
Yeah.
I can hear my brother coughing over here. When it comes to babies, it usually affects people. So what I do like about what you're doing as an organization is you're trying to give Kenya an example. This is how Kenya should be. Kenya is a lovely state. Nairobi is a beautiful city. You should try and live that way. You're showing a good example.
Yeah, and it's beautiful. Paintings, colors everywhere. It's beautiful.
Yeah, so there you got a visual understanding of the interventions that were taken and some of the feedback from members of the public. you know, when you assess the methodology, you realize that first of all, you get that kind of surprise by people, you know, who get to see that, wow, the place feels safer, the place feels more open, you know, there's more confidence to walk along that street, as you could see from the response from the people along the street. And in that way, you know, you make people believe that change is possible. You know, many people, you know, would not believe that that kind of change would be possible, but through such temporary interventions, you make people have that full understanding that, wow, change is actually possible. There's obviously the environmental benefits, as you had people talking about coughing and choking and such, you know, and some air quality tests were done, and it, you know, just shows you, you know, that there's improvement in could lead to improvement in the health of the people along that street through better air quality. Of course, you know, the use of color, paint, art, music also attracts people to the street, and that helps a lot. You know, some postcards were shared to get people's views along the street, and you know, and the responses tended to be positive. Of course, there was that backlash, you know, from the public transport sector, who felt that they were being denied their space. Although the reality is, most of them, you know, most of those vehicles, you know, remain parked until they get full. And you know, there's other ways of having that done. What is more very interesting is that the method has also been now quoted many times by people who work for the city. A number of city engineers have been mentioning placemaking as a methodology of engaging members of the public. You know, as recently as 3 weeks ago at inter-county discussion forum, members of the Nairobi County government were talking about telling other counties on how they can use placemaking to engage the public and make the public understand the important benefits of improved public space and improved non-motorized transport infrastructure. Other cities have also shown interest, you know, as recently as last week, you know, Kisumu County, Kisumu City were asking, you know, how can we are interested in pedestrianizing a few streets. What is the best, what are some of the methodologies from the gentleman I was talking to? I was explaining to them how, you know, the use of placemaking as temporary interventions like placemaking can help create, make the stakeholders have a better understanding, and also enable the stakeholders to participate in the process. You know, you see people there painting and, you know, putting some plants out there. They also feel that they are part of the process throughout. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Constant, for that elaborate presentation of the placemaking. So, colleagues, participants, one that marks the end of the methods. But we would like first, we were planning for a breakout session, but before that, we just want to give maybe 1 or 2 minutes for any comments or any question from participants. Yeah, maybe just to respond to the earlier comment which was posted by Amanda. Yeah, first, Amanda, thanks also for your interest in our work. Yes, as we said, as I mentioned, we are sharing preliminary analysis of findings of the work we've been doing. So, in the area of disability, yes, we are keen on also working with the disabled. But what the challenge, as you may have noticed, the methodology are fairly interactive. So this load us, especially between May and August, because we wanted to do this work in Mombasa and Nairobi, but because of this COVID situation, we are waiting for things to stabilize so that we are able to reach out to other people. Otherwise, it's part of our plan to work with the disabled so that we can also factor in their voices in this work. Yeah. Thank you. Any other comment? Even from the team, I saw Yusuf, who joined us from Kampala. Yusuf, anything you'd like to highlight on Kampala work?
Hi, Roman. Sorry, I'm a bit late. We did have a bit of a traffic challenge along the way, but I am following, and maybe I'll highlight a bit later on in our discussion. Thank you.
Thanks. Welcome, Yusuf. Thanks a lot for that. Yeah. So Howard, maybe in the absence of questions, maybe you can go to the breakout session.
I just see Patrick Kayamba has his hand up.
Oh, sorry, Patrick. Patrick, sorry for that. Welcome. Go ahead, Patrick. Did you listen, Patrick? I think the floor is yours.
Perhaps he could type his question into the chat.
Because he's muted, yeah?
I'm not sure. Shall we
yeah, can I say something?
Oh, okay.
Sorry, thanks, Patrick. Sorry, welcome.
Hello?
Hello.
Yes, how are you, my brothers?
We are fine, Patrick.
Yeah, I want to say thank you for the presentation and for the study, which is very elaborate. I'm sorry, where I am, there's a bit of noise, so you will have to bear with me. I have two questions. The first question is in regard to the available policies, whether there has been any interaction or interrogation of the available policies. Whereas the communities or the people of the community of society may have their own views of how they want their city to look like, how they want the different initiatives in the city, but how about the spaces that are provided for by the policies? They could be at national level, they could be at city level. So I don't know whether, because it didn't come out quite well, it may have not been one of the key areas for investigation, but knowing how it can be able to impact on the results, particularly when it comes to implementation of decisions, when it comes to allowing people to participate and bring out their ideas, and then later seeing their ideas being implemented. So I wanted to know whether there was some deliberate effort in that direction. Then the second question is in view of whether there was a balance of densely populated areas and sparsely populated areas, because you know they give out different results, and that you can also know that most of our cities are actually categorized with both the densely populated areas and then maybe the sparsely populated areas. Maybe they would give different results or different ways on the way they look at their cities and something like that. So it would be nice if we can have this segregation. And I heard somebody talking about people with disabilities. the old people. Whether there was, of course, it may be difficult to bring out all the different categorizations, but whether it would be nice to make one or two points on, because they have different views. How about the youths, the young people who make up the biggest majority of our population in urban areas? Maybe it would have been nice, well, as we are talking about age and gender, I noted that very, very prominently. But I think those are some of the issues I thought that we needed to have a bit of clarity. Thank you so much, otherwise.
Thanks, Patrick, for those useful questions and comments. Yeah, maybe I'll attempt just to highlight some of them, then I'll give my colleague Daniel and Yusuf maybe to talk about the spaces in terms of the densely populated areas and sparsely populated areas. So in terms of availability of policies, I think I didn't mention it, but we did a fairly comprehensive review, and we found that there's a good attempt by most of the countries and especially the city authorities to try to embrace policies which are inclusive, though not as much as what we would want. But there's a good attempt. Maybe just to reflect on Nairobi. Nairobi, if you look at the Nairobi Integrated Urban Master Plan, it's very inclusive in terms of looking at how it's addressing the missing gaps for the people using NMTs, which I think it's a plus, and also taking into account making a Munguli Avenue an NMT and then an NMT street. It's a because something is budgeted, it's something which is organized. So it's a good attempt, and most of our cities, when you go to Kampala, Lusaka, there's a good attempt to do retrofitting, which actually goes beyond policy, but we hope that they should make policy that this issue Daniel, can you say something about the sparsely and densely populated area of Lusaka in terms of sampling?
Yes. Thanks, Romanus. Thanks, Patrick, for a very good question, actually, which actually applied to all what we have been doing. The presentation that I did is just part of the overall investigations and research that we have been doing. So, but before we actually started doing the participatory mapping, we did focus group workshops. So I'd like to answer the first question about existing policies and where they're not matching or matching. So, so to answer that is we did focus groups with different groups, disadvantaged groups, and also with policy and planners. So we had people from different local authorities, and we brought them in one group, and then in one meeting, and then we had a group of disadvantaged groups. So these were disabled in different ways, blind, mental health, and so on and so forth. So the findings was that the existing policies actually did not match the aspirations and the views of the disadvantaged groups. So that was part of the first part of the project, the work package. So to answer the question is that they don't really match, because most of the disabled groups felt that they were not involved in all the decisions that made up those policies. Then the next question is that in terms of approaches, densely populated areas and also scarcely populated areas, again, part of this participatory mapping methods and also innovative methods we are doing is we are building on these methods at different levels. So we are doing what they call Delphi interviews. So these are interviews whereby you start with the overall picture, a huge number of questions, and then based on those questions, you asked different questions, deduct from those responses, and then you come back and then you scale it down again. You come to again, from those responses, then you scale down, come to different questions. And so what we are doing, we have now at the stage where we have developed, come up with 2 questions, and exactly what you actually asked for, where we'll look at different areas and and different people to to actually answer that exact question that you have asked. So I think it's in a process, and all this should come up by the end of November or mid of November. We should come up with some answers. But I think your questions have been captured in your research.
Thanks, Daniel, for that response to Patrick. So Patrick, thanks a lot for your question. I think other questions we can put them in the chat, because I think we are short of time. I would like if you can spend time at least 10 minutes for breakout session, so that you can interact with these methods closely and try to resolve those questions in those groups. Yeah. So Howard, can you move us to the groups?
Yeah. Do you want to just go over the sort of questions that we want to discuss in the breakout groups? So I put on the board.
Okay, put them on board.
So really it's to look at the methods that we've presented. Are they appropriate for giving a voice to the disadvantaged groups in terms of walking and cycling and improving mobility? How can then these methods be taken up by professionals, practitioners, and researchers? And also then looking at the policy gaps, where there are gaps in policies that these tools could be employed in, and what format would policymakers like the tools made available to them, whether it's in capacity building, whether it's an online platform that they could refer to. What we're interested in is, making these methods and other methods as well that we've been using, making them available and used to address the issues of active mobility. So I'll stop sharing now, and then I will.
Welcome back. We are just around 7 minutes. I'd like to maybe give the rapporteurs maybe one minute just to highlight the key issues which they are discussing in their group. Let me start with room 2, Asil and Tim. That's key issue.
Yeah, just a few key issues at Kim. First of all, we pointed out that the methods are effective, but we have to also recognize that no single methodology brings out all the results. So each has its strengths as far as output and also the scale at which they work. For instance, but participatory mapping can be done at a much larger scale, whereas placemaking is done at a much smaller scale. We also talked about the importance of not trapping people within public transport. By that we mean we need to create more opportunities for people to be free to walk and cycle. Okay, and we can do this by having standards, for instance, standards that enable persons with disabilities to be able to engage and move around the city, feeling safe and involved. We also mentioned that we tend to focus on physical disabilities with PWD, but we also have to recognize that there are other disabilities that people have that we need to consider in our plan. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Constant, for those highlights. Yeah, so I can move to Charlene, you're please for room 1.
Romanos, before that, can I add just one point that was raised during our discussion?
Yes, summarize. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So one point that was highlighted is the issue of timing, that when you're using these methods, it is important to know when to apply them so that you're able to get the right group. Because sometimes you might organize, you might apply a method that you will not be able to get, the people you are looking for are not available or didn't get the chance to attend. So it's important when you're even applying the methods to know when to apply them and to purposely select the group you are targeting to be able to get the representation that you are looking for.
Thanks, Kasim. For that issue of time factor is very critical for you to mobilize effectively so to get a good output from the participants here. Yeah, so we only have 1 minute. Shalini, just around 2 points so that we close within the given time frame.
Okay, from our session, we had similar findings. One thing that stood out was it was mentioned that due to the use of placemaking in the ongoing Mukuru SPA, they were able to negotiate and compromise the standards of the road width to accommodate user experience. And this goes to show how placemaking can not only serve the professionals, but also accommodate the user experience on the ground. Then there was the general feeling that these avenues provide useful information to all the professionals if implemented correctly and involvement at all stages. I guess that's what we had for our session. Maybe someone can add something that I left out.
You highlighted all of the issues because I think of time. I'd like just maybe to first to thank the organizers, and the participants, and also my colleague from SCI York, Zambia Road Safety, for your participation in this particular seminar. I think I want to put this to a close because of time, but I want to thank you for your time and also your interest in our work. So you can visit also in our SCI website also to follow up some of the activities we are engaging in terms of mobility. And we hope also we'll also meet in other sessions because these are 2-day webinar, and we hope we'll also get opportunity to interact in other sessions. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.